So welcome to this presentation again. This is the continuous lecture or presentation on the subject of pyramid scheme. Here, I really wanted to give a broader scope and definition on pyramid scheme, especially with we other countries use it, and then I will talk about some of the jurisdictions in the Pacific. Specifically, I will bring up the Tongan definition of pyramid scheme as well as the Samoan. My apology for the other countries in the Pacific. It's just because I probably don't know how to search much on bringing in the pyramid scheme, a definition of pyramid scheme in other jurisdictions. But I think what is important here is that this presentation, despite that I look at the various definitions as well as the commentaries on the pyramid scheme in the academy as well as these two countries that I'll mention, it is also important that the definitions they can be said to be broad, or they can be also be said that it's defined in a different way. But the target of the participants or the audiences that have been part of pyramid scheme, it's not actually not different from what actually been done. So. Once again, welcome to this presentation. As you know, I'm the co-founder and lead consultant for the Pacific Forensic Accountants. My name is Walter. So firstly, we'll have to look at a broad definition of it. Then I will finish off with the regional context, and then I will reflect it an example through demonstration after I look at the pyramid scheme in my own country, or where I come from in the Solomon Islands. So pyramid schemes, it is important to understand that pyramid scheme is not only happening in the Solomon Islands or happening in the Pacific. In the other presentation, the way it had started in America in 1920s, it's basically reflected that the pyramid scheme is actually a thriving ground for people who really want to convince people I should describe as vulnerable. Pyramid scheme, according to Ju Sifu, I remember whatever I said about these names, the references refer to the attachment. I've also put in the attachment of this literature. They are actually a well-publicized papers from the academics as well as the law for cases where I refer as differentiation under legal jurisdictions. So here, Ju Sufi actually said that pyramid scheme, also known as Ponzi schemes, are a form of fraud in which quick returns to the first investor come from money invested by later investor. So firstly, it is a pyramid scheme known as Ponzi scheme. Now, those of you who really don't know what is Ponzi scheme, in my other presentation regarding the US context, I will cover Ponzi scheme. So just remember that Ponzi scheme is also a pyramid scheme. But when I cover, when you go over to the presentation for the American context, you will see that Ponzi scheme is another set of definition, or the reason why this scheme is also named as the Ponzi scheme. So they said these schemes, or the Ponzi scheme, are a form of fraud. A fraud in which quick returns to the first investors come from money invested by later investors. So it's basically said that the very first people who actually put in money into something like they call invested. So those first investors, the very first people, they will be benefited by the people who will be putting in their investments later. So this is what it says. Again, this definition says it's a game. So where people or individuals or companies pay out funds to some, not all, only some, not all, by borrowing funds others. So let's put it this way. Companies or individuals, they actually have funds. So according to Sadira, are games where individuals or companies pay out funds to some parties by borrowing funds from others. To survive, they need to use invested funds to pay other investors. When there is insufficient money left as investors start to withdraw, they collapse. So this is what they said. Individuals. So it can be individuals, it can be companies, and also it can be churches. It can be women's group, or it can be market vendors where they pay out funds to some parties by borrowing funds from others. So when everybody brings their money, so the people who actually put in their money first, they will wait for the second wave of people who will do the investment. So the first very people will be paid out by funds from others. So in order for these companies and individuals to survive, they need to use invested funds to pay other investors. But where are these invested funds actually originated from? So when there is insufficient money left as investors start to withdraw, so they collapse. So this is what Sadira said. So even if you are promised, like, okay, you need to bring in your money and you deposit, then maybe after 45, 50 or 30 days, 20 days, or whatever days that they promise you. So that promise will be held on, and they will pursue aggressively to convince other investors to invest. And so as soon as they do that, they will use the money from the recent ones, so the one who just put in their money, so that they can use that money to pay for the first investors. So this is what actually Sadira said. So Sadira's definition actually involves people, individuals, companies, and which I extended it to cover, associations or church organizations, or women groups, men groups, or high school children, or it could be market vendors who are, struggling day in, day out, and they probably that they should join such pyramid schemes in order to move on. So let's see what Feng said now. So let's see what Feng actually has to say about this definition. Now, Feng said, generally it refers to the business model that recruits members via a promise of payments or services for enrolling others into the scheme rather than supplying investments or sale of products. So Feng and others actually refer to a business model. So this is actually a business model. So pyramid scheme is a business model. Now, this business model survives by recruits. So it recruits members. It recruits members via a promise of payment. So that's exactly like what I have just described. So a promise of payments or services. So now it's not only payments, but it's also services. So it depends what kind of services it is, like massaging, or it can providing of clothes, or providing of diamond rings or gold rings, and all these of services. So it can be in a form of payments, or it can in a form of service. So you are promised. This is the important thing, that recruits members via a promise. So people are easily, or they are willingly be members of this recruitment. And that recruitment only occurred by the willingness of people because of this promise of payments. Think about if you are a beggar on the street, if you are street just begging every day, and you heard of this promotion, you will probably convince, you probably want to sacrifice, even if the minimum was $250, or if the minimum payment was $100, you can sacrifice. So promise via payment of services for enrolling others into the scheme rather than supplying investments or sales of product. So what is important for people or customers, or the people who have just recruited, or if you are really want to be part of the scheme, for example, the question to ask is, where would be the supplying of investments or sale of products will occur, because the sale of products or the supplying of investments, which can be the returns of the money that you put into an investment. If no investment, if there is no sales of product by these people who have this business model, or who recruits members, if they don't do the supply of investment, or if they do not reinvest your money, they will probably collapse, because the promise will be collapsed, because most funds will be used to pay for the promise that have been made. So this is what actually it means, like understanding where would the supply of investments come from, sales of products come from. When this one occurs, or this one occurs, then there is a chance of a profit. Now, I will be having a presentation of supplying investments, or understanding some background, just basic background of investments, so that one can understand how this one is working. So this is actually Feng. Now let's look at the Chinese definition. This one is defined by the Chinese law. Now, the Chinese law says the behavior where organizers obtain illegal benefits or disrupt economic order and affect social stability. This by calculating and paying remuneration for the number of personal or sales performance, directly or indirectly developed by the developer, or acquiring the developer to qualify for the membership on the condition of paying a certain. So let's start off the behavior. Where organizers? So it is what the organizers. These organizers again can be referred to individuals or individual, can be referred to companies, can be referred to churches, can be referred to teachers, can be referred to market vendors. So organizers, as long as you are organizing to obtain illegal benefits. The illegal benefits, it means that a benefit that comes into your hand or into your pocket or into your bank account that is not within a business. For example, if your business is not registered as a bank or it's not registered as an association. So once organizers obtain illegal benefit or disrupt economic order. Now, in my presentation on the case of Albania, this is what it means by disrupt economic order. Or if you listen to the presentation that I did on the Central Bank of the Solomon Islands and the statistics related to what I've discussed and measure it with Albania and why, and the reasons why regulators really want to discourage its populace as well as the people who involve in pyramids. This is because of this economic order, because economics can collapse and it can affect social stability by calculating and paying remuneration for the number of personal or sales performance, directly or indirectly, developed by the developer. So it's a quite comprehensive definition by the Chinese law. Also, they said it's acquiring the developer to qualify for membership on the condition of paying a certain fee. And also, once you are involved by paying in an investment and then later you will receive a commission or dividend or something, or you are also part of this thing by paying a certain fee, this is what the Chinese law defines as an illegal, or at least being within what is described as the pyramid scheme. So this is covered by the Chinese law, and I've explained the research papers or in the academia on this pyramid scheme. The next one will be the definition of the Tongan Financial Institution Act. Now, the Tongan Financial Institution Act actually says that Tongan Financial Institution Act, that was in 2014, it defines pyramid scheme as any person who directly or indirectly initiates or offers or advertises or conducts, finances, manages, supervises or directs a scheme where profits earned by participants in the scheme largely depend on increases in the number of participants in the scheme or in the size of their contribution to the scheme. So it's actually a very, very comprehensive definition, but it aims as well to capture all the scenarios regarding the pyramid scheme. So any person who directly, indirectly. So it means that if you go from house to house, this is what it means by directly. Or if you are approaching your market vendors, if you are approaching your congregation, if you are approaching your colleagues in the ministries or your organization's colleagues, if you are, this is what it means by directly. Indirectly, it can be you teaching certain people, a group of people, you really wanted them to go out and market on your behalf, for example. They can be referred as indirectly, something that you do not do it directly. So the Tongan law actually very broad in this. In these two scenarios, any person, so it depends on what the Tongan law says. But in most jurisdictions, a person can be referred to a company, or it can refer to an individual. So that's the tricky part of any person. So, by the way, as long as any person, as we know, other definitions include a company, who directly or indirectly, so based on what I've just explained, if they initiate Initiates, you do the planning. You started talking about it. You started convincing people. This is initiate. And then you're actually offering them like, oh, this is the products that we are selling. Like if you deposit this, you receive this. Or if you pay this, you will receive this. Or if you have a fee in, you will receive a fee out like this. So this type also refer to offers and advertises, as long as you do it on social media, or you do it in other social media outlet, or you do it in the mainstream media, or your all these conducts throw money in and out for the purpose of what you wanted to initiate. Or your managers, this refers to the directors and the managers of this person, if this person is a company, supervises, if you are supervising this person, or directs a scheme where profits earned by participants in the scheme largely depend on increases in the number of participants in the scheme. It means increases in the number. As long as the profits earned from participants actually will come as a result of the increase in numbers, that is basically what it means by participants in the scheme, or in the size of the contributions to the scheme. So it depends. Even if the size is small, it doesn't say. If the size is big, it doesn't say. But as long as in the size of the scheme, contribution to the scheme, so it depends. So remember, pyramid schemes come in a very different forms. It comes in very different direction. It can come through church, it can come through organization, it can come through the very people that you believe in them, especially your managers in organizations, as well as the people who really selling you products. I mean, the normal products, but then something turned out to be different. So these are the things, these are the challenges that faces the very people who are victimized by these sort of activities. So let's appreciate that the Tongan definition is very broad, but that's how lawmakers attempt to close the gap and able to advocate to its citizens that these are the definitions that you actually need to understand. As long as these verbs comes in, you initiate it and you advertise it, you offer, you conduct and so forth. But then the profits earned by participants in the scheme largely depend on the increases in the number. So as the number increase, the people here, they promise that there is a profit, but there is no actually profit. They claim it that there is a profit. There is no profit at all. Actually, as the number increases, it's actually occurred in the scheme, then there is funds will be paid for the first people who throw in their money in a scheme. So this is actually basically a Tongan definition. So they extended to saying that such patients shall be liable upon conviction to a fine not exceeding 1 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 30 years or both. So this is what the Tongan law says. Let's look at the summary. Law is captured like it is not under the financial institution. Here the Samoan law, they capture this under the Competition and Consumer Act 2016. The Chinese one that I've just explained, as well as the Tongan, as well as the Solomon Island context that I will cover, the definition falls under the Financial Institution Act. But the Samoan one is caught under the Competition and Consumer Act 2016. So this is what they say. Pyramid selling and similar schemes. A person must not promote or operate a scheme for the supply of goods or services for reward if a person must not promote or operate a scheme for the supply of goods or services for reward if. So there is no cash mentioned here actually, but person shall promote or operate a scheme for the supply of goods or services. So services can describe the way we actually giving money to others and say, give me this money or this amount of money, then I'll give you a dividend or a commission of 150 or 100% in 30 days. This is what actually it means by service. Supply of goods is just the same thing. You give me these goods, then I will be able to trouble you with these goods in the next 30 days. You know, this similar type of scheme that actually happen here. So this is actually what they define. The supply of goods for reward if. So they stop that a person must not promote or operate a scheme for the supply of goods or services for reward. So there is an if. What is the if? If too many participants in the scheme constitutes primarily an opportunity to buy or sell an investment opportunity, whether personally or through an agent, rather than an opportunity to buy or supply goods or services. So let's look at the final sentence. The final sentence allows the normal way we actually have the opportunity to buy or supply goods or services. This normal way, the way accountants and lawyers and doctors as well as our wholesalers, that one is okay. But what they really want to avoid is when this scheme person must not promote or operate the scheme for supply of goods if too many participants in the scheme. So it forbid that if the scheme has too many participants. Then the second condition, the scheme constitutes primarily an opportunity to buy or sell an investment opportunity. So now it forbids if it's too many people involved and if it's actually registered or it's actually promoted with the opportunity to buy or sell an investment, whether personally or through an agent. That one is not allowed. So either if you are doing it directly or if you are doing it through your office or your agents on the ground or in the villages or in the counties that we have. If these conditions met, then the scheme is not or is likely to be unfair. It's likely to be unfair to many of the participants in the scheme in that. So if the scheme is defined to be this definition here and this definition here, then the scheme is likely to be unfair to many of the participants to the scheme in that the financial rewards for many of those participants are dependent on the recruitment. Many of those participants are dependent on the recruitment of additional participants, whether or not at successive lower level. So this is it. So if actually the rewards for many of those participants are dependent on the recruitment, so the whole thing can be illegal at the end of the day if participants are dependent on the recruitment of additional participants, whether or not successively lower levels. So even if you are beneficiaries, but you are not from at the lower level or the higher level, that depends. Pyramid scheme, as you know, it's shaped something like pyramid, like an A. If you are within the side of the pyramid or at the top level, that's still not acceptable. As long as those participants are dependent on the recruitment of additional participants, that is absolutely an unfair thing as far as the law is concerned by the Tongans. So that's number 1 of B. Okay, B2, it says the number of additional participants in the scheme that must be recruited to produce reasonable financial rewards to participate in the scheme is not attainable or is not likely to. The number of additional participants in the scheme that must be recruited to produce reasonable financial rewards to the participant in the scheme is not attainable. So it means that when you are part of the additional people recruited in the participants, this scheme is still an illegal according to the someone. So that's definition of number 2. Let's go to Roman numeral 2 as part of A definition here. So this A, AB, AB1 and AB2. So now we go to section 2. Section 2 of the pyramid scheme. A person must not promote or operate a scheme of a type commonly known as chain letter scheme, whether or not it provides for the supply of goods or services. So chain letter scheme, we all know chain letter scheme existed long ago. Some people thought that it's a Nigerian chain letter, and it's also affecting other people within our communities, and this is like across the globe as well as in the Pacific. So as long as the scheme promotes this thing that we know that is a chain letter scheme, then that is likely to be unfair to many of the participants in the scheme. So we say as long as participants are unfair in the scheme, in that if the financial rewards for many of the participants are dependent on the recruitment. So again, the survival of this illegal pyramid scheme, if it's dependent on the additional recruitment of participants. And secondly, if the number of additional participants that must be recruited to produce reasonable financial rewards to participants in the scheme is not attainable, or is not likely to be attainable by many of the participants. So if you look at this one, it's all about when there is financial rewards that is not attainable, and also an additional participant that must be coming in or recruited in to produce reasonable financial rewards. These are all under the Salmon Law as illegal. So I've discussed the broader definitions in the academia, and as well as the Chinese, the Tongan, and the Samoan. Now, if you look at these, there is nothing so complex to look at it. The simple summary of all these definitions is that a scheme that can be sold to participants, and those participants, they buy it through actual investment or by fee, then the reward can be in a form of additional goods or additional investments. So because of the existence of additional, I think what is really emphasized, because of the additional refer, because as long as these additional participants come into the scene or into the list, into the investment, this additional will be used to pay for the first participants. So this is what the law says. This is what the academia says in terms of protecting our people. So before you're losing your money off, this is a knowledge for all of us to at least think about what the academia says, what the law says. So we have talked about the Chinese one, we have talked about the Tongan and Samoan. Now, some people will ask, how would I know that this thing is illegal? How do I know that these people are not doing additional participants? So I've tried to put in a very simple presentation on simple investments. So that simple investment advertisement, it will cover some knowledge, giving you some background to the victims as well as to people who really want to understand on avoiding pyramid scheme, and also for the regulators to understand. So I will make an analysis of certain investments that are will be giving us the possibilities, and just for your information. And also I will be covering a demonstration on in a Excel spreadsheet on to look at what it means by participants and additional participants, and why it is so not sustainable for new recruited participants. So just look at the appropriate presentations, and then you can access it from there, including the demonstrations. Thank you.